So anyway, look, thank you everyone for joining. My name is Siafra and I'm one of the money mentors here at Women's Wealth. And today I'm joined by my wonderful colleague, Simon, who's part of the Women's Wealth team as well. So as you guys know, Finance on Friday, it's one of our Women's Wealth broadcasts where we just spend half an hour talking about topics which we think are sort of, key topics for our members. And this the topic today was really inspired by actually a conversation I had with a client sort of fairly recently. And it's again around the cost of childcare. So having had two children myself, certainly it's a topic very close to my heart. I'm seeing towards the end now, I've got a 20-year-old and a 17-year-old, so I can see sort of light at the end of the tunnel, but it's a very long and dark tunnel. It can feel like. So UK costs of childcare in the UK is one of the highest in the world. I think it's actually number 3. So we get a really, really raw deal at the moment anyway in the UK. We actually did a cost of childcare podcast a couple of months back, and I think they were sort of saying is that the average cost of raising a child is around it's well over 200,000. It's actually £223,256. So that's a hell of a lot of money to raise just one child. So as I said, if you've got 2 children or 3 children and everything is that, obviously that number sort of goes up. So the other thing that's been happening recently is you guys probably also heard about the autumn budget, and that's also caused, unfortunately, there'll be implications on childcare from the release of this autumn budget. So the main takeaways there are, for example, if you are paying, if you have like a nanny or an au pair, then you'll be seeing probably increases in your hourly rate from the minimum wage. So the increase in minimum wage will have an impact on you. But also if you're just in nurseries, a lot of those staff working in nurseries or childminders will also see their costs increase and therefore will be passing those on. So there's the minimum wage increase that will have an impact, and also we also know that the national insurance contributions also is also getting worse for employers. So again, if you have a nanny, you are actually an employer and you're responsible for their costs. Now, when the autumn budget came on, they said that anyone who had a small employer would not be impacted, but unfortunately, nannies are actually outside of that exemption. So unfortunately, if you're using a nanny to help your childcare, you will certainly see that being passed on to you. And similar again, if you're working with nurseries and things like that, expect that childcare cost, unfortunately, could well get charged on to you. So if you are concerned, what we would say is come and talk to your financial advisor. We can certainly at least help plan and forecast what the impact would be for you on those costs so that you can help better manage them. So that's really just a little bit of why we do the call today. So moving on, what I wanted to do is myself and Simon are just going to maybe talk about some of the experiences that we've had in terms of raising our children. So I'm going to start by quizzing Simon, if that's okay. And Simon, just maybe you can talk a little bit about your choice, because it's a really unusual one. I was sort of really interested when I heard about it, what your choice has been for your family.
Yeah, sure. So I've got 2 children who are 13 and 10, and my son was in school up to about year 1, and then we decided to home educate him, and so he stopped going to school at that point, and his sister's never been to school. So yeah, our childcare decision was to not use the state provided school childcare, and to home educate them and do that ourselves.
Yeah, so that's why I was sort of so interested, but it's becoming really popular these days. I think we keep hearing about how homeschooling seems to be becoming a big thing, and definitely more and more parents are looking at that. So I just sort of wondered, with that choice that you made, what are the sort of the main considerations? Are there sort of additional costs which maybe that you didn't, or savings, for example, that you sort of didn't see when you started that, or you made that decision, or that you've just experienced now through that choice?
Yeah, I would say it's never going to be a financially motivated decision, because basically most of the consequences of that decision are that things cost you more. So the decision was motivated by desire to let the children be in charge of their own education, so they could follow their curiosity more. They could learn different kinds of skills that you wouldn't necessarily learn in school. And a couple of examples of that: my son has a YouTube channel, so he's really into that. He's really into editing videos to go on that. And my daughter's interested in writing a finance book for children, which obviously makes me very proud. But that's, I guess, an example of doing something different, and something where it takes her interest, and then she can focus on that. So that's why, from like an educational point of view. From a financial point of view, I think it's one of those things that you don't like when you make a decision. You don't necessarily think of the full financial consequences, and so it's quite hard for us all to think on a 10-year basis, a 20-year basis, and see how things will impact our finances. So people say, oh, the holidays, you can get a cheaper holiday if you're home educated because you're not tied to the school holidays. That's probably one financial advantage, but the main huge difference is obviously you have to entertain your child and care for your child for those school hours, when effectively the state is providing free childcare for children aged between 5 and 16 in schools. So then on top of that, you've got the cost of the groups, the cost of tutoring. So yeah, like I said before, it's not really a how to make myself wealthier type of choice. It's based on other things. And I think it's interesting to think about big decisions we make, and maybe think about how the consequences of those decisions build over time, because I think that's one thing that's tricky for us all to get a handle on.
Yeah. So, and there are our kids, and the emotional side takes over, rather than maybe the maths side of our brain probably takes over, and that sort of thing. Yeah. So that's it. So again, so it sounds like you didn't use planning. Is that right? In terms of like when you were sort of making this choice and everything. So is that something that you would sort of suggest then that people do, as I said, if you
it was a decision motivated by like the educational choice rather than the financial choice, which not every decision boils down to what's optimal financially, obviously. But now I know about financial planning, and so when we help our clients, we can think, these are your costs now, these are how inflation is going to affect your costs over the next few years. Here's what's likely to happen with your salary or your income as a family, and so you can get a better handle on those kinds of things, and understand the financial consequences of decisions that you might be making anyway, but understand those financial consequences as well.
Yeah. And so did you have, between you and your partner, did you have a good conversation? I mean, it sounds like, because you're working with us, Simon, I'm assuming you're not helping them do their physics homework or whatever they have to do. So presumably mum's doing that role. Did you talk about whose role was the main sort of childcare role?
No, we didn't.
You got no teaching skills whatsoever. Was it sort of obvious?
No, I think so. I'm responsible for helping them with maths, and I don't do all of it, but I help them with maths. I help them with other stuff. So, but obviously, yeah, most of it does fall to my wife, especially in terms of the time, and especially in terms of taking them to the groups they go to and taking them to the things they do. So yeah, did we have a big discussion about it? No, we didn't. We probably, like lots of people do, we felt our way into parenting. We didn't come up with a plan beforehand. We didn't think about those consequences. And for us, it's turned out okay, because we do check in and go, are you okay with how things are falling to you? And vice versa. And so, but I recently watched the film Night Bitch, where a lot of that was about the frustration of one parent who was at home with a toddler whose partner didn't really understand how hard that was for her and how much it involved her giving up. So I think the takeaway from like a financial planning point of view is to have that conversation, to actively think about who's going to be responsible, and then think about, is everyone okay with that, basically?
Yeah. Okay. Good. That's something else. I've got a film recommendation for the weekend as well, which is great. So thanks, Simon, for that
That's
one.
good. You're welcome.
Yeah. So mine was probably sort of like a bit different. So obviously I probably use more down the traditional path. I just sort of, as an overview, I've used a range of different sort of childcare options. I think I've used all of the ranges I think that you possibly can. So I think I've used nannies, I've used nurseries, I've used au pairs, and yes, definitely the school holiday clubs and things like that. And also then with my big corporate career, I decided to send my children to boarding school because I was traveling so much. So yeah, I feel like I've used them all.
Yeah,
You could probably give pros and cons on pretty much all of them. But the one thing in common is that they're all expensive, I would say.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I would guess, how have the costs changed over time as well with them?
Um, so in terms of what I saw in terms of cost, I think the one that was probably the most economical I found was and it was au pairs. Um, Nannies are very expensive again because you're an employer. So it's obviously an au pair, you're actually not an employer, so that makes quite a big difference. And the difference I think with au pairs are much more flexible. So for example, if you're a nanny will not put a hoover around the floor. They are very constrained in what they'll do. They will only literally look after the children. They will not do a single piece of housework. So they like clean up after the child has eaten, but and they clean toys. But as I said, if your house is a mess and you've got a ton of ironing to do, they're not going to help you with anything to that, even though the child might be asleep for an hour or two. Whereas I think with an au pair, I found that was much more flexible. So that was of all the ones I used, that was my sort of favorite. Although it is difficult, you've got somebody who's living in your house, which is, is different. So we were lucky with all the au pairs that we had, and they seemed to like us, which was good. But it's a difficult one. In terms of cost, it's got to be boarding school. That's the complete. As I said, so I've got one more year, thank God, and I don't know if I'd do it again, to be honest. It's a real, and obviously with the VAT on private school fees, that's a real killer. But anyway, I'm not going to ask said people to feel sorry for me. As I said, it was right for us at that point in time. And again, I suppose, yeah, we were lucky with that. We even had that choice, I suppose, available to us. So that's a good thing. But financially, again, it's very tough. Yeah.
Yeah, that's one of my thoughts is that whatever you decide, you have to be prepared that the costs might go up. So the story of cost in general the last few years has been inflation, but then you have things like the school fees going up and the
Yeah.
things you mentioned at the beginning as well. That even if it's okay for the next 2 years, you have to think on a longer term because the costs might not stay the same.
Very much so. And you really hate it because it's your children. So taking something away from your children,
Yeah.
again, we seem to be able to go with things out for ourselves, but when it's our children, we hate kind of asking them to give up things. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So one other thing I was interested in from like a financial planning perspective, and specifically working at Women's Wealth, where we think more from a woman's perspective, was whether you had that conversation about who was going to be the main earner and who was going to be the main carer in your family before you had children, or at any point really.
Yeah, so I think similar to you, Simon, I don't think we had enough of a conversation. So I actually was the main earner. It wasn't a huge gap before I had kids. But it was silly, but my mum had never been a stay-at-home mum. And I think again, as a woman, we just sort of fall into that trap that we just sort of feel like that's our role. So there certainly wasn't a good enough conversation. I think that has changed over time. So certainly again, when I was working my corporate career, it was really nice to see the dads stepping up much more. It's great hearing you talking about that you take the baths and things like that. So I think it's much more common now. But I think so. So yeah, for me, the thing would be yeah, don't sort of be, again, we fall into these traps sometimes, these stereotypes of as women and being the main child carers. But again, maybe we do have to challenge ourselves if that is really the right role for us. And maybe just, don't just take a step back and just really have a proper conversation about it. So yeah, that would be my advice to anybody, to really think about that.
Be an interesting one. It's interesting where, for example, if you said you were the main or the higher earner at the time, so yeah, was that part of the discussion, or just not really? Did you just fall into it like you said before?
No, I honestly, I think I think again, I was sort of thinking, I think in my head I was going to be, would have a career, and then I just would be a mum. And I think it was just at that point. And I mean, you have to think probably at that point in time, everything like there wasn't like paternity leave and things like that. So I think again, all of the government packages and everything was probably leading to women taking the brunt of the childcare. But so certainly, and still today there's still some discrepancies, I think, a bit between what, maternal and paternal leave, although it's really, it's leveling out and now plateauing. But those are the sort of things I think which, again, like everyone's telling you that is the right thing. And certainly, like little play groups and things like that, you see very few dads. So it would have been, I think it would have been quite hard as a dad also going into that environment as well. But it's really encouraging to see more and more male, sort of figures to pick up in that area. So definitely recommend people to have the conversation. Yeah.
Well, and one other thing I was curious about was to do with pensions. So we're financial planners, so we talk about pensions a lot. And there's obviously a pension gap as well, where women's pension pots tend to be smaller than men's pension pots. So did you have any discussion about that? So you're stopping work, so you're stopping your pension contributions. Did you have any conversation around that?
Yeah, unfortunately not. And it was sort of interesting. Also, I'm sad to say that we did actually have a financial advisor at the time, and also they never even mentioned it as something that's for us to even think about. So no, we certainly didn't do pension contributions, and definitely, as you can see, whilst again I did go back into corporate and I caught up quite a bit with my husband in terms of earnings and things like that. But in terms of wealth, when you look at again certainly that pension gap, there is certainly a considerable gap between my husband's pension and at my pension. And again, it's like exactly what you said, is you don't really understand sometimes the choices that you're making today, what a huge impact they have for later on. And I wish I'd had access to financial planning, the cash flow forecasting that we do. I wish I'd had an advisor and again, he was male. I don't know, maybe he didn't feel like he could ask some of those questions, because again, sometimes it can be a bit sensitive maybe for people to ask sort of questions like, who should be the main breadwinner. But I wished my financial advisor had asked the questions, and I wished again we'd had more financial planning. I think then, as I said, you would have made the decision a little bit, better informed about the thing. So so it's something certainly, and I think we're both passionate about it. But when we work with our clients, it's something that we really, we try to have these conversations with them. So again, they're making them much more consciously than maybe we did.
Yeah, always starting from like a fully informed perspective, and then deciding what you want to do on top of that, basically, is the way I see it.
Yeah.
I think one thing that I was thinking of when you're talking there is, so we often get this situation. So if you have a male and a female couple, and the woman's at home, has taken career break to care for the children, and the man is still earning potentially at higher tax rates, there comes a situation where, when you're talking about pension contributions, it's a lot more beneficial from a tax point of view to pay into the man's pension.
Yes.
And as working at a firm where we specialize in helping women, sometimes that suggestion that you benefit, you do what's best for the team, the couple team overall, but that suggestion sometimes makes you feel a bit uncomfortable, because it depends on the relationship, whether that's how that's going to pan out in the long run, basically, I guess.
It does. And I think, yes, we have to remember, unfortunately, not all marriages end up in a happily ever after situation. And again, just having someone that you can sort of at least talk that through, or just really think about what the things could be. But again, we've talked again about divorce. Again, often the pension gets forgotten. And so, as you said, if you've taken a step back, not only have you lost maybe in terms of your earning potential, you've also lost from a wealth gap. And then, as I said, often it's that pensions are completely forgotten about. And then women, you know, as you said, the wealth gap for an average man and an average woman is high. But the wealth gap between a man and a divorced woman is ridiculous. It's like, isn't it, 9% or something of an average man's pension. So divorced females are in a really, really poor situation. So yeah, the more we can get people talking about this and making sure, and it's when women have children that this is the main time when this gap is created. So it's one that we really need to educate ourselves on and really think about seriously.
Yeah, sure. And it seems wrong to say this, but if we're talking about childcare, but if a relationship does end in divorce, then thinking of taking the pensions into account when coming to a settlement is obviously really, really important as well.
Absolutely, very much so. Yeah. So anyway, so that's our experiences. So Simon, where do you think we should go from here then? Yeah.
Well, it's tough, isn't it? So the UK is expensive for childcare. Recent budget changes have made it worse. There's no real easy answer. So as our colleague Victoria said before we started today, that if it is difficult, you shouldn't feel bad about that, because there are lots of things that are making it difficult for lots of people. And I think also, I guess, offer that hope that once that period does come to an end, then there's the potential to earn higher and to save more once you're through that period of lots of childcare costs as well.
Very much so. And I think you're absolutely right. It's never too late. So people sometimes often come to us, you're right, in our planning, and they say they're feeling bad and they're kind of putting more shame on themselves because they didn't get it all right. And kind of nobody gets it 100% right. And even if you're starting it, okay, yes, the best time to start planning was probably 20 years ago, but the second best time to start planning is today. So there's always more that you can do. And, you know, so certainly, like for myself, I really put a load into my pension as soon as I went back into my corporate career. So that's why I was able to close some of the gaps. So yeah, it's never too late.
Definitely. Some other tips that we have as well were to have that conversation before you start with having the children. So who's going to stop the paid work? And if one of you is going to stop the paid work, so how is that person going to be compensated for that? How will the financial responsibilities be shared going forward? I think what we said as well, getting an idea of the cost and then how that cost might change over time. Obviously, financial planning is a great way of doing that as well, because you know, most of the costs we see and most of the costs we're talking about here have gone up and will likely continue to go up. I guess one of the other things that we're always talking about is fully informed decision making. So knowing the cost of each of the different options is something we work on with clients a lot. So if you go down one route, what will that look like from a financial perspective? And if you go down another route, what will that look like? And then you can make a fully informed decision about your options. Also, we haven't talked about employer policies around childcare and flexibility. So understanding what your employer offers is important as well. Siafra.
Absolutely. So I think I was really I'll get on my soapbox again. I'm sorry, I get really cross about this. I had another, she's a lawyer, so she's a really bright woman, and she is thinking about starting a family. And it really annoys me. She had to go and ask for the maternity policy. I mean, these sort of things, it's ridiculous. You know, you're already feeling nervous enough about having a child and what's the impact that's going to have on your career. You shouldn't have to go and ask for a bloody policy. You should be able to, you should just be able to access that sort of information. And even when you get offers, that information should sort of be available again, because it's awkward to have to ask for it. You know, you don't really know. You already think, you know, what are the things that they're sort of thinking about. You don't really want to be creating barriers for them to sort of think about hiring you. So yeah, employers need to sort of step up further. I mean, I was lucky. The employers I had 6 months off when the children were, you know, we did full pay. And you know, you could certainly, the job was available after that, you know, as well. So so yeah, I had probably pretty generous, and I think that's one thing that generally, you know, it's pretty good in the UK. I think some of, you know, what we have compared to, let's say, some other countries. But yeah, still more to do, and we've got to get these guys, as I said. So it really is equality in terms like that, so that there's as many men as women that can take the leave and take the lead on some of the childcare as well.
Yeah, that would help, wouldn't it?
Certainly would.
And one other thing I wanted to mention was to watch out for the earnings points where you start missing out on, for example, contribution to childcare costs. So you start losing this if you earn more than £100,000, for example, you lose it completely. And so be aware that you can use pension contributions. If you've just gone over that amount, be aware that you can use pension contributions to keep yourself up that amount, and then that gives you a real big financial benefit doing that. And also that the child benefit gets withdrawn once you start earning above 60,000. So again, you can make additional pension contributions to make sure that you stay below the 60,000 limit.
Yeah, absolutely. So these are all the things that we can absolutely make sure that you're kept on the right side. But yes, there's still more for the government to do in that, from that perspective, isn't it? It's still a bit mad that yeah, with your earnings, that you can have two people earning a lot more and bringing a lot more, and yeah, versus a single parent who's earning maybe a higher amount. Yeah, so it's, anyway, we won't go there. As I said, that's a long one, and the government needs to do more there as well, don't they?
Yeah, they do, and it's definitely something that we can help you with as well if this is an issue for you. So we'd love to speak to you. If you'd like to book a discovery call to explore how we could help, that'd be great. But I think we're coming to the end of our time today. So thanks to everyone for joining us. We hope you found it useful. You can join Women's Wealth for free if you sign up for Enable membership, which there's a link in the chat too. And that will give you access to courses on how to start investing, resources that will help you manage your money, and just some resources that will help you to start creating that fabulous financial future that you want to create for yourself. And we're authorized and regulated independent financial advisors. And if you need a more one-to-one service, you can upgrade your membership to suit what you need. Yeah, and as I said before, if you'd like to explore working with us, there's a link in the chat so you can book an appointment so we can see how we can help you. The next Finance on Friday is on Friday the 28th of March at 12 p.m. and we'll be talking about end of year tax planning. So yeah, we'll talk about maximizing your allowances and how you can keep more of your money in your pocket. And also we have a live session, which is Ask the Advisor on 13th of March. You can email www@womenswealth.co.uk with questions, or you can just turn up and ask questions on the day. And so, yeah, thank you for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you at the next event.
Thanks, everybody. See you soon.